background that looked like you, that had the experiences that you had had in life, it must have been a challenge to sort of get acclimated.
Absolutely, especially on the academic front. Having come from Ballou High School, where I was a high achieving student, I was an A student. However, an A at Ballou High School is not an A at Brown University. In fact, it's almost failing in some instances, depends on the course you're taking. But having to rise to the occasion of being able to compete on the level with my peers, who in most instances had been adequately prepared. In fact, had even had opportunity to study in sort of those academic rigorous environments such as Brown University. So they had the practice, and for me it was a challenge because I didn't necessarily have all of those same advantages.
I was interested, did you tell your classmates at Brown that there was a gentleman that followed you around for 2 years and wrote a book about you? Yeah. And how did you approach that? Did people not believe you? Oh, that's not true. Someone wrote a book about you? Talk a little bit about that and how you introduced that into conversations.
Well, I did not introduce it.
Okay.
Actually, just even me to this day, I've always been one who's very private, and I don't go around talking about myself unless I'm speaking, of course, going out lecturing or whatever, and I tell my story. But for the most part, on the day-to-day, I try to lay low. I don't even mention the book. Oftentimes, people come to me having read the book. And so when we got to Brown, Ron Suskind and I, we had come to an agreement that, it was important that people not necessarily know off the break that we were connected and how we were connected, because it would impact people's behaviors and how they responded to him. So he came in basically as this reporter, blindly, seeking to do this book. And it's funny because there were students, they didn't know who was going to be the main subject of the book. Some of them thought they were going to be the main subject. But I never said anything because I really didn't want people to treat me any differently. Even though there were people who had, because by that point there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and some people knew who I was through the article, but it wasn't because I shared it with them.
Okay.
And even after Brown, when I went on to Harvard and went on to Michigan, people never knew. And in fact, some of my colleagues with whom I attended University of Michigan, we're currently working in social work together, they laugh and joke because they say, "You're the mystery man." I used to be known as the mystery man because they didn't know that I was going to speak at various schools. They just knew I was going out of town. So there was this running joke that I was the mystery man going off to this place, this undisclosed location. But
right, of course. I'm curious about, you had sort of a unique look into what other people in your life were doing. Before you came into a meeting, there are paragraphs about what the professors were thinking, and you really got to see what other people were thinking about your very situations. I'm curious, when you read the book, was there anything, or when you were looking at the notes, was there anything that was surprising to you about how the people around you were reacting?
There were some instances in the book where I was surprised, or even in learning more about the people that I had interacted with. I especially those that my classmates at Brown, I didn't know much about them other than what they gave me on the surface. But with Ron Suskind, he kind of dug a little deeper, and it added some insight and perspective onto, that's why they were behaving the way in which they were behaving. And that's why that's why we had that sort of interaction, because, coming from, in some instances, two different worlds, and then in some instances, similar worlds. It really added perspective and insight with regard to, the behaviors and why we had the exchanges and interactions that we had.
That's interesting.
You went to Brown, to Harvard, University of Michigan.
Yeah.
And you went into the professional world. You're in the professional world now.
In the professional world.
What does it mean when you say, don't go for the money, go for your passion?
Don't go for the money, go for your passion. Well, I often share this story, more so now, because, as of recently, I began to be a little more open about the fact that I had been at a crossroads in my career. And, interestingly, right toward the end of my Brown career, there were the interviews. And you had your financial services firms and consulting firms that were coming on campus, and usually the normal trajectory of a student from Brown that I had observed was to become a consultant or become a financial analyst, go Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And so I almost fell into that trajectory professionally. Had gotten an offer to work on Wall Street, and was excited because of the money, but I decided to go visit before accepting the offer. So I went to New York and visited the firm that had extended me an offer. And they were so gracious. But I realized that, in speaking with the employees and seeing some of the rigors of the day-to-day work that goes on in Wall Street, I said, this is not me. And, why would I put myself or subject myself to that kind of situation where I know this is not me? Right. Even though I could do this, be successful, make all this money, put my mom in a house perhaps, do some things financially. And so, I had to kind of dig deep. And, I still was kind of lost after Brown because initially I did go into technology. And, God has blessed me to have many talents and gifts. And, sometimes it's difficult when you have many talents and gifts because it's like, which direction do I steer it in? And so technology was one of the gifts. I've always been good with, having a high technical aptitude. And, I went into technology for about a year and a half. And by that time, Hope and the Unseen had come out. And I had been touring and speaking and interacting with folk all over the country, families, children, and was realizing that my heart was really with people. Mm-hmm. And that, that was my calling to work with people. And in realizing that, I decided, I always knew I wanted to go back to graduate school. And however, in interacting with people on the road, I realized that I wanted to pursue something along the lines of counseling, psychology, that sort of thing. So I was looking at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and I looked at, I think I looked at University of Pennsylvania and a few other schools of education. And ended up getting into the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And it's funny because I got my acceptance letter the day before I got my pink slip from the firm that I had been working with because they were downsizing. Mm-hmm. So I said, Lord, I know that this is you talking to me because I'm on the right path now. So, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was on the right path and went on to Harvard and
and now you're actually working in social work.
Working in social work, I've been I've been a social worker for about 5 years now in the Washington, D.C. area, have been doing treatment foster care, and I also, recently I'm more so doing adoptions. And It's been wonderful working with families, working to strengthen families, working with young people, helping them, because I always say that social workers, people sometimes sleep on the work that we do. They don't give social workers and teachers especially the props that we all deserve, because we put our lives on the line in many instances, all in the name of helping people, because that's what our passion is. You don't get into this work for the money. You get into it for the passion and the desire to want to help other people. And so for me, I get a joy out of working with young people, because I say social workers, we don't wave a magic wand. Right. There's no magic wand to this. I believe that people come to us even when they're in dysfunction and have come to us with many problems. They still have strengths. And I believe that, it's my goal as a worker to pull out the strengths that are there. Somewhere down the line, I believe that they were not nurtured and were not acknowledged to that person. And my job has always been to bring out the strengths, to help them to see that you are a human being, you are special, you come to the world with gifts and talents, and to help them see that and start them off on a road that, they basically creating their path, and that's what I do.
And you are special. Thank you so much for joining us
today.
Thank you, Cedric.
We have to take a short break. When we return, we'll talk about the statewide reading initiative called One Maryland, One Book. Stay tuned. You're watching Campus Conversations.